opportunities who continue to enrich our vibrant university community. So like I said, the things we'll be going through today are about choosing your campus and your program, admission requirements, how to apply, what you can anticipate out of the evaluation process, what comes after admission, and then some time for the Q&A at the end. So how to apply? So the first step for applying to the University of Alberta is either going to be choosing your campus or choosing your program. Technically, you can do it in either order. I've just got choose your campus as the first one here. So most folks are aware of our North Campus, which is in Edmonton. Many of you, if you're from the city, would be aware of this, or even if you're not from the city. But we do also have two other campuses that are a part of the University of Alberta community. So also in Edmonton, we have our Campus Saint-Jean, which is actually our French language campus. So at this campus, you can do both fully French language degrees. And so your instruction would be entirely in French, but you can still do the same degree type, things like Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, and whatnot. Or you can choose to do bilingual degrees where you share your time between the Campus Saint-Jean and North Campus. So some examples of that would be a business program, a nursing program, things like that. And then our last campus that we have is our Augustana campus. This campus is in Camrose, Alberta. So it's about an hour and a half away from the city center of Edmonton, where our North Campus is. And it's located in a more small rural community in Camrose. At this campus, you can again find your standard degrees, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Management, and whatnot. But what you get to experience at this campus is more multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary learning between different subject areas. And so if you were looking for a smaller campus feel, this might be of interest to you. Just in comparison, this campus has between 1,000 and 2,000 people, whereas our North Campus in Edmonton has almost 40,000 people. So if you wanted to use that in your decision-making factor, then that might be something to keep in mind. Next up would be choosing your program. So if you're still on the fence about the program that you're interested in, I would encourage you to visit our program search tool. So that's going to be that first link you see, which is uab.ca/programs. A lot of folks that are transferring in from colleges or polytechnics aren't actually aware of all of the different types of programs we have. There are over 200 of them to pick from, especially when it comes to the majors that are available. So in our Faculty of Science, for example, we have some majors that folks may have never heard of before, things like immunology and infection, for example. That they just might have not had exposure to in the past. So if you know what kind of realm you're looking for, whether it is science, whether it is arts, whether it is business, but aren't really sure how to narrow it down or what makes these programs different from each other, I would encourage you to check that out. If you feel like you need to talk through your options or talk through that decision-making process with someone, that someone would be myself, you can book advising sessions with us at uab.ca/advising. I will give the disclaimer that these advising sessions disappear like this. The registration becomes open 2 weeks before the start time of the session. And when you're going on this website, you just want to be making sure that you are signing up for transfer student advising. If you sign up for high school student advising, you're probably not going to get the intended outcome of that session, just because in our office, we all have different specialties. And so you want to make sure you're either signing up for transfer student advising, or you can opt into faculty specific advising if you know exactly which faculty you want to enter. We also have an on-demand video library that you could go and visit and watch various information sessions about these programs, and that's the last link, which is uab.ca/on-demand. The last thing I'll mention when it comes to choosing your program is that on your application for admission, if you are what we call new to you or external transfer applicant, you can pick two program choices. You want to be picking these choices in order of priority. So your first choice should be your absolute diehard, I really have to have this program. And your second choice you should consider as more of a backup. Another thing to keep in mind when you're choosing those two choices is which program is more competitive. Typically, we would recommend the program with a higher GPA requirement is your first choice, and a lower GPA requirement be your second choice. All right. So in terms of requirements, they are fairly standard across the board. And then there are just a few outliers where the requirements may be different. So the first across the board requirement is going to be the minimum number of credits that you need to be considered a transfer student. This number of credits is 24. So for those of you that are attending an institution that uses a 3 credit system, which most places do now, that would be 8 courses. If you have less than 8 courses, either you're studying part-time or you just have no intention of getting those 8 courses before then, that's okay. It doesn't make you immediately ineligible to transfer to the U of A. It just means that we have to take your high school grades and courses into consideration. Some folks hear that and are like, great, I did amazing in high school. But some folks have the opposite reaction and they're like, ooh, no, I'd rather keep my high school out of this. If you're one of those people that wants to keep their high school out of this, you would need to obtain those 8 transferable courses in order to meet that threshold. When calculating your grade point average or your GPA, it's going to be based on those last or most recent 24 transferable credits. So if you're someone who's been studying for a number of years, perhaps you're in your second year of university now, then your first year, as we go through the application cycle, will become irrelevant when it comes to calculating your GPA. If you were to apply right now, early, of course, we would have to use your first year, but if you apply later on, then we might use, for example, this current semester and the winter term of your first year, and the fall term of your first year just becomes completely irrelevant because it's not the most recent representation of you as a student. That minimum GPA is going to range anywhere typically from a 2.0 to a 3.0. Most programs that are not honors programs are going to be a 2.0 or a 2.3. Most programs that are honors are going to be a 3.0. Now, this is just the absolute baseline minimum. In many cases, you are going to need to have grades higher than this, which is what would be the competitive grade point average. We do post last cycle's competitive grade point averages on our website. The link is uab.ca/averages. And on the next slide, I'll just show you a quick screenshot of what that looks like so you know where to go and what to look for. That competitive grade point average is likely going to be a range. And what that means is that throughout the admission cycle, the majority of folks who were admitted were within that range or above it. You can use that to guide your decision making on whether or not you have a good chance of being admitted into a program, but you should not use it as an absolute cutoff because the grades can fluctuate each year depending on what type of applicant we get. And then the last thing to keep in mind in terms of requirements is either high school or pre-professional coursework requirements. If you're interested in Faculty of Nursing, Faculty of Kinesiology, Faculty of Science, Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of ALES, they will have high school coursework requirements. And so what that means is even if you are a transfer student, and even if you have been at university or college or a polytechnic for 1 or 2 years, you still have to have the correct high school requirements for entry or an appropriate substitute from the post-secondary level. The reasoning for this is if you are entering a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences and you don't have grade 12 biology, you are not going to be able to register in those courses. Because you don't have the prerequisite. So those will be checked to make sure that you have them, but the grades that you got in those courses will not be relevant unless you're under that 24 credit threshold. Then in terms of pre-professional coursework, this would be for programs that require you to have 1 or 2 years of university study in order to qualify you typically for a specialized program. So examples of this would be the Bachelor of Commerce program, our Bachelor of Science with the dietetic specialization, and really any of the programs that you would find in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry. So things like dental hygiene, dentistry, pharmacy, medical laboratory science, radiation therapy, after degree nursing, and whatnot. If you are entering a program that has these pre-professional course requirements, you have to have them all. That's not negotiable. And so you would want to be making sure that you've got those either already completed or you have a plan to complete them within this academic year or whichever year you plan to apply. So in terms of transfer credit, but specifically in determining if your courses will be considered transferable to the University of Alberta, there are two resources that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is Transfer Alberta. So if you are studying at an Albertan institution, which some of you may be, you might already be familiar with Transfer Alberta. You can go in and say, I'm attending Northwestern Polytechnic. I want to go to the University of Alberta, and then pick your courses from a list, and it'll spit out the answer in terms of what is transferable. If you are not attending an institution in Alberta, your next best bet is going to be our internal transfer credit search tool. So this is a database of all of the transfer credit that we have granted to external transfer students in the past from a variety of institutions, both across Canada and internationally. You may not find every single course you are taking in there. That's okay. It's likely just because you're the first person to attempt to transfer that course rather than it not being transferable. But if you had any queries or anxieties about that and wanted to email us, you can absolutely also do that. I will just give the note that when we are referring to transferable courses, typically, those courses need to come from an accredited institution, whether that's in Canada and our accreditation system, the United States, or internationally. You're not going to find transferable courses typically from private institutions or from colleges that are career colleges. They need to be from true academic institutions. Again, if you're not sure which category you would fall into, we can always help you out with that via email. And then the last thing is, again, for it to be considered transferable, you need to have a grade of C minus or higher. If your grade falls below that, there is no chance of you receiving transfer credit for that course. And if it is a requirement for your degree, you would need to repeat it once you entered the University of Alberta. Okay, I promised that I would show you what the website looks like. So this is what the website looks like, the uab.ca/averages. You have to scroll down about halfway through the page because the high school averages are first, and you want to come down to where it says AGPA ranges. Then you're going to see all of the program, or sorry, all of the faculties listed out. I've just expanded specifically the Faculty of Arts. You will see a generic average at the tops. For arts, you can see 2.0 to 2.3, with the exceptions of the programs listed below. And then they've listed out which programs are the exception to that norm. So whichever faculty is your faculty of interest, just make sure you're expanding that box and taking a look. Another thing that I need to bring up in terms of admission requirements is English language proficiency. So every applicant to the University of Alberta is subject to the English language proficiency requirement. Now, if you grew up in Canada, did your high school in Canada, you will likely just wave right through this process because based on the information you provided to us in the application, we can see that you've studied at an institution where the primary language was English. And typically, you would need to take no extra steps. However, if that's not you, perhaps you did your high school abroad, for example, and you've just recently arrived in Canada, then we would need to discuss options in terms of meeting this requirement. So I've listed here a few different options that are quite popular for students to meet English language proficiency. So from high school, for example, if you did your high school in Alberta, even if you were an international student on a study permit, if you completed English 30-1 with a certain grade, you would be exempted through that process. Similarly, if you did IB or AP or A levels, there are ways in which you can bypass the requirement of a language test. You can also bypass a language test if you have 3 or more years of full-time education in English, whether that's in an English-speaking country or at a certain institution where the language of instruction is English. Another option that's quite popular with folks like yourselves that are at post-secondary is to actually take two courses or 6 credits of English, literature, or composition. So if you were able to complete like an English 100 and an English 101 or your university, college, or polytechnic's equivalent of that, again, that's another way to get waived through the process, but there is that minimum grade requirement as well. And then finally, if none of these are going to apply for you and you would prefer just to take an English language exam, we have our popular options, things like IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo, but there are other options as well. And then a caveat to all of these things is if you are someone who's interested in the dietetics program, anything in the Faculty of Nursing, anything in the Faculty of Education, anything in the Faculty of Pharmacy, or medicine and dentistry, you have to prove a higher level of English language proficiency called spoken English proficiency. The options to complete spoken English proficiency are it's a much smaller list than previous. So it's either 6 years of full-time education in English, up from the 3 years that you saw on the previous slide, or you can still take the language exam, but a higher score is required. So if you're interested in one of these programs, make sure that you are on top of this because the requirement is higher than it would normally be. All right, so we're moving into sort of the application process part of today's session. So I may have mentioned before, but submitting your application early is quite imperative just for all applicants, regardless of if you're high school or transfer, et cetera, to the University of Alberta. And the reason for that is for most programs, the longer you wait, more other seats have been filled. And so you make it inherently more difficult for yourself the longer you wait to apply. We don't know you exist until that application is in the system. You will submit your application directly on our website at uab.ca/apply. And the applications opened on October 1st. So they opened about 3 weeks ago. And what you would be applying for is next September or fall 2026. The deadlines stay the same each year. So if fall 2026 is not the year you're looking for, you can anticipate that whatever year you are looking for, that the October before that is when this application would be opening. And then in the same vein of applying for admission, if you are someone that's going to be relocating to Edmonton and you would prefer to live on campus, after you submit your application for admission, you can then apply for a spot in residence. And if you do that before April 30th, you have a guaranteed spot. They will find you somewhere to live. So keep that in mind in terms of the deadlines that are coming up. So here we're just going to go through some of the application together so that you can see it and familiarize yourself with it ahead of time. So the application looks almost identical for everyone, and you can see that sidebar of all the different sections that you should go through. It looks like a long list, but really it should only take you 30 or 45 minutes because as we go through, there's a lot of just multiple choice question and answer. So first, you're going to start off with your personal information, things like your name, contact information, emergency contact, and things like that. After that, you're going to move into your academic information. So probably for all of you, the questions, the way you're going to answer the questions are going to be as followed on the screen. So you are a post-secondary applicant. Then you would choose what type of post-secondary institution you're attending. You will also be asked if you've ever upgraded any high school courses at a post-secondary, if you've been required to withdraw, and how many courses you've completed. And this is all, like I said, just your yes or no answers. After that, you will also be asked about your high school curriculum, and this is because of that English language proficiency requirement, as well as any high school coursework requirements. And so this is a way that we can sort of figure out which stream you're going to be in and what requirements may apply to you. Then you're going to move into the academic history section of the application. This is where you need to be quite conscious of the way you're responding to this section. So in here, you're going to be asked to put in all your high schools and all your post-secondary institutions. When you are entering that, you need to pick the correct level of study, whether it is high school, whether it is undergraduate, and the attended from, but particularly the attended to dates are very important. If you are currently studying somewhere, let's say you're studying at MacEwan University in Edmonton, and you plan to transfer to the U of A for next September, then your last sort of month of day of attendance at that institution is going to be April, because that's when you're going to finish your courses. The reason why it's important for you to put that end date is so that we know when to request your transcripts. If you put the end date like 3 years from now as if you were to stay there, a lot of things are going to go haywire. So just make sure that you're conscious about the dates that you're putting in this section. Then you're going to move into actually picking the program. So again, you would be picking fall for 2026. If this is for this year, it would be the same if you were doing a future year. And for almost all of you, your intended status is going to be a degree student. Then it's going to ask you, similarly to how I spoke earlier, which campus are you planning to attend? Whichever one you select will change the drop-down options below, so make sure you're selecting the correct campus. Then it's going to ask you to pick the faculty your program is housed underneath, and then to select your program. In this example here, the Bachelor of Science in Engineering, there's no specific majors. However, if you were entering another faculty like business, arts, science, another drop-down would appear that would ask you to select your major and your minor. And then, like we spoke about earlier, you'll be asked if you want to apply to a second choice program. You can see in the example I pasted here, this student just said, nope, I only want my first choice and that's it. Or you can pick yes, another page is going to pop up and it's going to ask you the exact same questions: which campus, which faculty, which program, which major, which minor. Now, for any of those faculties I mentioned that require high school requirements, you're going to get an extra section that looks like this. It's going to say for this specific faculty, in this example, it's science, these are the required high school subjects. It's just going to ask you yes or no, how do you have these courses? And just answer truthfully. If you were applying to any of the professional programs, so the ones I mentioned that are more healthcare related, like dentistry, dental hygiene, things like that, you would actually have a section that says pre-professional requirements instead. And instead of just asking you yes or no, you would actually have to insert the name of the course, what school you did it at, and when you did it in individually all the way down the list. But again, this is where it slightly varies for person to person. And then another example of how it varies person to person, based on your previous answers about your academic information and your academic history, you may be prompted to fill out this section about English language proficiency. You will then answer how you plan to meet this requirement. You could say, in this example, I choose an exam and here's the exam I'm going to do, or I'm going to use my education or my coursework, and then just select whichever one is appropriate for you. Now, moving to the end of the application, this screenshot and this section only applies to students that are attending a post-secondary institution in Alberta, or someone who did their high school in Alberta, but then perhaps went out of province. What is happening here is you are able to give us authorization to obtain the transcript on your behalf. This means that you don't have to pay, you don't have to get involved, you don't have to remember to request and send your transcripts. We will take care of it for you. I highly encourage that if you are either of those people that I mentioned about high school or post-secondary in Alberta, that you agree to this declaration and this authorization just to make the process easier on you. Now, just a couple of notes about the evaluation. If you are applying to a program that requires Casper, probably for those of you that are here, it would just be those of you that are applying to nursing. You are not going to be evaluated until your Casper test result is received. Doesn't matter if you've uploaded all your documents. If that Casper is not there, your file is going to sit there and it's going to collect dust. So if you are in the audience and you're applying to nursing, and you haven't already signed up and or taken your Casper test, let's bump that up in your priority list of things to do. Then, if there are any of you that are applying to the Bachelor of Commerce program and you're in your first year, like you just graduated high school and now you're in your first year, and you submit your application anytime from that October 1st, basically up until December, don't panic when nothing happens to your application or when you get a decision that says on hold. That is just because business, their standard of practice is to only evaluate after the fall semester has finished. This is really the only faculty that this applies to. So just keep that in mind. There's no need to panic. It's the same for you as it is for everyone else that's in your situation. And after the fall term is finished, so in like that January, February time, your evaluation is going to happen then. Okay. Moving on to scholarships, similarly to residence, you can only apply for these after you have applied for admission. Because after you apply for admission, you will gain a student ID number, an email address, a password, and all of those things you're going to need to apply for scholarships and awards. There are two links that you can go to. The uab.ca/awards is where you can actually go in to enter the portal. And then we just have one separate website, which is uab.ca/ML awards. If you are someone who is an international transfer, so someone who, regardless of where you're studying, if you're doing it on a study permit, then we have some extra information for you there. The applications are open for a set period of time. It's always February 1st to March 31st of whatever year you are applying. Can't do it earlier, you can't do it later. And this applies to all application-based scholarships, which we'll review just after this. It's one application to be considered for all the scholarships. You do not need to go through a list of the thousands of scholarships that are available. You will fill out this application. It's typically 2 to 4 questions. And then the Office of the Registrar and your faculties are going to match you to scholarships that are appropriate based on your answers and your academic performance. So the first type of scholarship we have is an admission-based scholarship. These scholarships are automatic. You have to take no extra steps to be eligible for these beyond just submitting that application for admission. These are purely based on academic performance. No other factors are taken into consideration. So this is just about your admission grade point average. For those of you that are transfer students, you could be eligible specifically for one type of scholarship that's up to $2,500. The second type of scholarship is an application-based scholarship, and this is what I was referring to earlier in terms of those deadlines. This is where you have to put in the effort to tell us about you and about how great you are to be eligible for these application-based scholarships. The examples I've put on the screen are ones that only transfer students are eligible for, and I want to give the disclaimer that this is not all that you're eligible for. You will also be eligible for any other scholarships that, for example, come from your faculty or come from a donor and things like that. These are just some examples I've chosen here. So, for example, folks that are relocating to Edmonton, just some money to help you with those relocation costs. Similarly, if we have any out-of-province students, we want you to be able to go home, see your family, see your community, another scholarship for that. Or for those of you that are super passionate about getting involved in student life at the University of Alberta and basically need money to fund your future and fund your goals, then that's what we have at the bottom, the Unlock Your Potential Award. Now, speaking of awards, it would make sense if we compared this to information about tuition. So we'll have two slides, one about domestic and one about international. So domestic tuition is going to apply to anyone that is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. On the screen, you can see a breakdown of the tuition, which is the instructional cost of your program. Then you've got basically ancillary fees, so books, supplies, and then things like health and dental plans, student union fees, things like that. And then lastly, this may not apply to all of you, but if you are interested in residence and with a meal plan, that's an additional cost that you can add on. Then similarly for international tuition, we have the same breakdown of instructional costs, ancillary fees, and then residence with a meal plan. Something to note for international tuition is that we offer something called a tuition guarantee. So what this means is when you get an acceptance to the University of Alberta, part of your acceptance letter is going to be an outline of the exact instructional cost of your program. It's going to give you a year by year and then a total cost. That number is locked in and it will never change. And so you can use that as a way to plan your financial means throughout the course of your program. Whether you are domestic or an international student, you can always go to uab.ca/cost calc. This is our cost calculator, and you can go in there to get a more refined estimate to your situation because these costs can vary per program, especially if you're in a program that has more lab work, for example. There are additional costs to run the lab and gain the equipment and those sorts of things. Back to residence for just 1 second. So residence is available for all upper year students, and it's in buildings that are separate from our traditional first year dorm, which is our Lister Center. So all upper year residence is apartment style. And so it's anywhere from a studio to 1, 2, 4, or 6 bedrooms. And then depending on which one you're in, you would have 1 or 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, a living space that you share with other students if you're not in a studio or a one bed. For upper year residents, meal plan is not mandatory. It's something you can opt into. So if you're someone that's like, nope, I don't cook, I don't clean, I don't do any of these things, I would like to have that taken care of for me, then you may want to opt into the meal plan. All of these buildings are fully functional and fully serviced, and so they have laundry, Wi-Fi, utilities, all of that's included, as well as things like tenants insurance as well. Now, once you've applied for admission, you're going to want to check your status in your Launchpad account. I'm going to show you what that looks like now, because if any of you have applied before, it actually looks different this year than it did in previous years. This is what the Launchpad looks like. It comes in, it says hello, all these sorts of things, and you can see the status of your application. And so these green bars that say application submitted, awaiting materials, awaiting decision, decided, you can see here that this example I've pulled, this student already received a decision on their application. If you were at a different point, some of these boxes would be grayed out. When you come in here, this is where you're going to be able to see your decision letter, which, we'll go back, is just slightly lower down on the page. As well, on the Launchpad, you're going to be able to see this checklist. So this is where you could come in to upload unofficial copies of your transcript. This is where, if you're applying to nursing, for example, you would be able to see if your Casper test result has been received by us and things like that. If you do need to upload any materials, you just follow these instructions, select your document, a PDF preferably, and then you just upload it. So let's quickly wrap up with a couple of more things about the U of A, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A. So the first is work experience, and I put this first because I know that this is of interest to a lot of students. So work experience can look slightly different depending on your faculty, mostly just because they call them different names. So in business, it's co-op, but in science, it's an internship. Really, they're all synonyms for each other. In most cases, these can be paid work experiences, with the exceptions of your Faculty of Education and your Faculty of Nursing, because they're in the form of unpaid practicums or clinical placements. Everyone is eligible to do work experience, including international students. There are just some additional immigration steps that need to take place, but you are still able to participate in this. Depending on which faculty you're in, this is either something that you can be flexible with in terms of the amount of time. For example, business, you can do 4, 8, 12, or 16 months of work experience. Whereas if you were in engineering, there would be an exact time period of work experience that's required by your degree, and they have a very set schedule you need to follow in terms of work term, study term, work term, and you alternate back and forth. The next thing would be study abroad. So there are a number of students that are interested in studying abroad at one of our partner institutions. We have partnerships in over 50 different countries and 250 different programs in total. It is still possible for transfer students to study abroad. It can sometimes just take a little bit of extra planning just so that you don't exceed your maximum allowance of transfer credit. If you are interested in this, I would just encourage you to explore your options at uab.ca/abroad, but this can be a really and truly meaningful experience, speaking as someone who did study abroad in their own degree program. And then lastly would be research. Typically, this is in the form of our undergraduate research initiative or URI. But for some of you, if you're in an honors program, your research is going to be embedded. But there are lots of ways to get involved in research, especially if it's going to be beneficial to you in either your further education, things like a master's or a PhD, or the type of career that you're looking to pursue. All right, we're ready to wrap things up. So, if you wanted to take a photo of anything that I've spoken about today, it would be this slide, which is all your key dates in one place. We have reviewed most of these already, but some that we haven't is just going to be your May 1st, which is your deadline to accept your offer of admission if you were admitted obviously before then, and then June 15th, which is the absolute cutoff, no exceptions, to have all of your documents in. That's all of your official documents. That's your English language proficiency. If your program requires a supplemental application, all of those things need to be received by then. Okay. And then lastly, I kept saying if you need any additional help, just to reach out to us. That reaching out to us would be via email. Our email address is transfer@ualberta.ca. The folks that are going to be answering those emails are myself and Danielle and one of our other colleagues, Teo. So if you need any additional help, just send us an email and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. There are only the three of us, so it can take us a couple days to get back to you sometimes, but I promise we will get back to you eventually. Okay, awesome. I am going to stop sharing my screen and pull up the Q&A, and Danielle and I will go through some of the questions.
Perfect. I'll jump in first to give Kaylee a little bit of a break. So there are a few more questions that just popped in. I have been answering them as we've been going. So, advice for applying to U of A teams. If you're thinking varsity teams, you need to speak with the coaches themselves. So, you can find on the varsity webpage all of the coach contact information. They are the ones that do the recruitment for their team specifically. There is no real application to them, it's just a recruitment process. So, if you're interested in that, then definitely reach out to them directly. We do have like intramural teams though on campus that you don't have to apply for. You just sign up and go. And you can join a team of people that you don't know or have a team of people you do know. And they're pretty fun on campus. So whatever you're interested in, definitely look for that in terms of those. Okay, I see one on competitive AGPA for science is a 2.2. So we do post the historical AGPAs for the previous year. So last year, some of the programs may have been a lower GPA. It depends on the year. Definitely strive for the best grades you possibly can. I say that to every single student that I talk to, because the 2.2 that may have existed in the past may not exist this year. So definitely just do the best you possibly can, and that's all you can really control.
I'll pipe in and answer the same one for political science for this student at RDP. So in that screenshot I shared of the AGPAs for arts, political science is not one of the ones that's pulled out for having a higher GPA. And so for you, I would just say if you're at that 2.3 or higher, you have a good a chance as anybody of being admitted to that program, but I would still give you the advice of applying early so that other folks aren't taking your spot if you're within that, because we can sometimes see the GPA fluctuate, increase, sometimes decrease, but normally increase as the cycle goes on, as the number of spots gets smaller and smaller.
Okay, I have a couple here that I can answer. So transfer students need to study for a minimum number of years at the U of A. Yes. So the maximum amount of transfer credits that you can transfer is 60 credits or 2 years worth of coursework. The minimum amount of time you have to spend at the U of A is 2 full years of full-time study to get a degree from the U of A. And then the minimum to spend in a faculty, so if you get here and then you're like, I want to actually switch it to faculty too, is 1 year minimum. So you have to actually study for 1 full year, full credit, 30 credit year in a faculty to get a degree from that faculty as well. Most of the times, if you're doing 2 years, you're going to get what's required. And then if you switch faculties in that 2 years, you're likely going to be spending a little more than the extra year just because of the degree requirements. But
Okay. I'll take the Casper question and then I'll just do a couple of the other ones. So That's a great question about Casper. You cannot take it a year early. You have to take it in the year that you are applying. And that's because the way Casper is marked is against the other applicants to the program in the same year as you. So it's not like a rubric of, oh, I got 90 out of 100 and it can be carried over. You're marked against your peers. And so you need to be marked against the people you're actually applying for. So, you take the Casper in the year that you were applying. Where do you take it? It's online, but it's offered or administered through a third party called Acuity Insights. So, depending on which program you're doing, if it is nursing or one of the medicine and dentistry programs, just go to their direct web page. They're going to have information about the Casper because there's a different code you have to put in depending on which program. So, you're going to want to do that all online. Question from Melina. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. Apologies if I'm not. If I have done upgrading to my high school classes, will those be used instead of my actual high school courses? That is a great question, and the answer is yes. If you've done high school upgrading, let's say you did English 30-1 in high school and then again, or math or whatever subject it is, the whatever is better, but in most cases, that's the more recent one for students is going to be used in that evaluation. So you do want to make sure, similarly to when I showed the application screenshots, that you're just answering the questions honestly, like, have you done upgrading? Yes. Or are you still studying? Yes. Just so that we know, for example, if you are still upgrading, that we need to go and get those new marks later on. But you can be assured that we will always use whatever marks are in your best interest to give you the best chance of admission. Okay, I'll do one more and then Danielle's back to you. Question from Allie. I will graduate from a community college in 2027, but my status in Canada is supposed to change from an international student to permanent residency. How should I apply? That's a great question, Allie. So when you apply, apply literally based on whatever your status is that day. If you are an international student that day, answer like that. For some of our students, their status either changes during the application process or changes once they become a student. Like maybe they're an international student for their first year and then they become a permanent resident. Whenever that happens, that information will be changed in our system immediately. So if that, for example, did change for you between first and second year, then you would switch immediately over to domestic tuition and not international tuition. So I'll just reiterate, apply with what is truthful in that moment. And then if it changes, you just need to email us. We'll get it sent off to the people that take care of all this stuff, in the sky behind the scenes, and we'll get that sorted for you.
Okay, I'll take on a few of these other ones. So dental hygiene diploma, we don't offer, but if you're talking about transferring from another dental hygiene diploma, our dental hygiene program at the University of Alberta is a professional program, so it does require 1 year of pre-professional study before you'd be able to enter into that program in very specific science-related courses and things like that. So I definitely look into those courses that are required. They don't do a transition program typically from another dentistry program into this one, so they do require those courses to be completed. So definitely look into their website. It's uab.ca/dhyg, DHYG. And then nursing after degree, should you apply now or wait until you get results from Casper, writing the test in November? Great question. I love this. Okay. So for Casper to be connected to your application, it's best if you apply, submit your application, and then write the Casper, and then we're automatically going to pull that onto your application. So if you apply now, then write your test, then we know and we can kind of pull it all together. It's a little bit easier that way rather than the other way around. Great question, though. Um, does the U of A consider a 4-course, 12-credit semester to be full-time? Yes, depending on the program, though. So some programs, like our professional programs, require a 30-credit year or a 5-course semester fall and 5-course semester winter as the full-time requirement. So it's really going to depend on what you're looking at and what you're applying into. But we also consider 3 courses to be full-time. So 3 to 5 is our full-time course load on campus for our students. So we would consider that the same, but it will depend on the program. So definitely look into that. Um,
You want to switch?
yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I clicked a couple. Okay. So we've got one here. How do I inform the university that I upgraded my high school courses? So having to make a couple guesses here about your situation. If you haven't yet submitted an application, then in that screenshot I showed you where you could say that you're a post-secondary, but then there was an option to say, I have upgraded my high school, click that. If you have already submitted and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't inform the university I upgraded, send us an email. Once you've submitted, you can't change the information, but we can change it for you on the back end. You just can't go back in and change it. So if you've already applied, send us an email. It won't be Danielle and I that change it. We're going to send it off to another unit to get changed, but just punched my microphone. Sorry about that. We will keep an eye on the progress and then we can just email you back once that information has been updated so that you can keep calm about that. My screen's jumping all over the place. Another one, are the grades taken from my current post-secondary when applying the most recent or the best grades? Most recent. It is your most recent performance to a like minimum 24 units. If you have more than 24 units available, it's going to be the most recent. We do not cherry pick out your best grades. It's always going to be your most recent performance. Only exceptions to this would be some of our professional programs calculate additional GPAs. So, for example, pharmacy calculates a science-specific GPA. But if this is not you, you're not applying to a professional program and you're applying to any of our sort of regular bachelor's degree, most recent grades, not the best one. And then last one I'll do before handing it back to Danielle. I see Louise has a question about applying to different programs from the same faculty. It's a great question, Louise. You can apply to different programs from the same faculty. You just can't apply to the same program multiple times. Not knowing why someone would do that, but just you can't do that. So yes, in your case, you've provided nursing as the faculty that you're interested in. So yes, you can absolutely do what the scenario you've written, which is pick bilingual nursing as your first choice, and then pick your second choice as just our not bilingual on main campus, only English collaborative nursing program. Okay, Danielle.
I got some. Okay, great. Okay, first year student, if I apply right now before fall semester ends, how would I have to do my application? Because I wouldn't have any grades to put in, use high school grades. Would you recommend waiting? You can totally apply right now. Definitely apply right now and upload an unofficial copy of your transcript, which usually shows your registration of coursework for your fall and winter term. Um, they will likely wait in most cases until they have fall term grades to do an initial evaluation. So likely that January, February timeline is when they'll do their initial evaluation. So once you have your initial application in now, just re-upload your transcript once you have your fall term grades in that February time. And we're going to do an evaluation once we have new information. That's every time we do an evaluation is when we have new info. So definitely you can still apply now and then just add in that new information when you have it. And we will evaluate it based on that. Is it possible to edit the date? Okay, any application changes that you need to make after you've submitted your application, you need to send us an email. We, you can't do those edits on your own. We will have to do that on the back end, like Kaylee said. You can also reach out directly to our Student Service Center, who is who we would send it to at uab.ca/ask, and they can make those changes for you if there's anything you need to edit after you've submitted your application. When an application says home units, does this mean credits? Yes, it does. And if so, do I only enter the ones that are completed? Um, Great question. So home units, yes, you're going to put the credits of the course that you're taking at your institution. So if you're on a 3 credit system like we are, then your course is maybe like a 3 credit course. You would indicate that. If it's a different units, because I know sometimes like engineering specifically is kind of wild out there and what the units are, you would still indicate your institution's units, not our institution's units. Likely you're going to be entering the ones that are completed, but it's going to be the program that you're applying to. So if they require like you to input coursework that is going to be completed for the program that's required, then you would also indicate those. Okay, double confirm that after submitting applications, all documents will be submitted latest by June 15th Are there any must-have documents that are needed to be submitted earlier? Most undergraduate programs, it is going to be that June 15th deadline. Depending on the program, though, professional programs specifically, they will have slightly different deadlines for different things as well. So definitely look into those websites if it is a professional program that you are applying into.
Okay,
Go for it,
I'm
Kaylee.
back. I was typing some answers, but I'll take some more. Okay, do College Board SAT scores help? If you are a transfer student, no. And even for high school students, we still don't even really use SAT scores. We just use your normal class grades, or if you did any advanced placement, which can sometimes be quite popular in the United States. So no, your SAT scores will not have an influence on a transfer application because it's your post-secondary performance that matters. Should I apply for a new study permit if I transfer to the U of A even though my current one hasn't expired? Great question and disclaimer, I am not an immigration professional, but this is public information. The new process in Canada, and this is like in the last year, because it used to be different, is that each new institution requires a new study permit. It used to be that you could just change the name. You just submitted a form and said, I used to be here and now I'm here. That's no longer the process. So when you are admitted to your program, you will be given a provincial attestation letter or PAL. That is going to be a part of your new application for a new study permit. And on top of that, if you feel you need any advice on this situation, the University of Alberta does have registered immigration advisors, and you can reach out to them either via email or book an advising appointment if you just go to the International Student Services and Visitors webpage. Oh, it jumped around. Can I apply to my program in the middle of a semester, second, third semester? So like, yeah, yes and no. So it doesn't matter what semester you're in at your school. You just need to keep in mind that we have a fixed application period every year from October 1st to March 1st, always starting in September. You can choose to study for as long as you want, but we typically don't recommend more than 2 years just because of that residency requirement of then being at the U of A for 2 years. But we don't have a preference in terms of how long or how short you're there, just as long as you're adhering to the deadlines. Danielle?
I got them. Okay. What program involves interview or statement of intent? Typically, these are our professional programs. So dietetics is included in that, pharmacy, dentistry, dental hygiene, medical laboratory science, and radiation therapy typically involve at least an interview. Not all of them will have a statement of intent. Some of them have different forms of that, like your work experience, volunteer experience, things like that as well. Their websites are the best source of information. Every single one of our professional program websites has very detailed information on all the things that are required as part of the application. So definitely check those out specifically for the program that you are interested in. And then submit an application using marks from fall, update the marks at the end of the fall term, but then at the end of winter, which would be in April, should you re-upload transcripts even though the applications end in March? You can upload transcripts when you have your winter term grades. Typically, the winter term grades aren't available until that June, like around the June 15th timeline, which if you're in an Alberta institution and you tell us the end date of your coursework, then we will pull those or end date of your exam date, whatever that looks like. We were going to pull those transcripts automatically. So you shouldn't stress too much about those ones, but you can upload as many copies as you want of your transcripts anytime there is new information.
That is a question. So, if I got admitted, how many months in advance can I enter Canada? We cannot answer that for you because we will get in lots of trouble. That is something that you will be outlined to you in your study permit and something that you should discuss with a registered immigration professional.
Okay, if you're talking, sorry, the question, if I want to apply for dental hygiene, but full transcripts from spring won't be available for the June 15th deadline, but still looking to transfer to the U of A, does it matter what undergrad you take in order to finish the classes that relate to the sciences? No, any program in the Faculty of Science will um, meet the requirements for the dental hygiene program, and you'll have the access to all of the courses as well to meet the requirements for dental hygiene. So you can choose any major. Typically, I tell students choose a major that you're interested in still as a backup option. In case you're not admitted to dental hygiene on the first try of your application, then you kind of have something you're still interested in that you want to take as a backup plan. Engineering one, I'll take it, Kaylee. Applied after first year to transfer to engineering and took a full course load. Do I need to submit my second year courses and grades as well to be considered? Yes. So if you were not successful in your first application, then you will need to reapply again to the program, and you will need to submit your new transcript. So submit a copy of your new transcript, and then we will need a new final official copy as well to include those new grades.
Okay, we need to start wrapping things up here because it's 7 o'clock. So I said I would answer one of them. I think this might be from the same person, but it says anonymous, so I just can't tell. What if I don't take a science undergrad? Can I still take any classes? If this is still the dental hygiene person, which I'm hoping it is, um, it doesn't matter which degree you have. What you need to keep in mind is if you're taking an undergrad that isn't in a related field, sometimes when you're trying to register for courses, you have delayed registration, which would mean that science students get priority over science classes instead of you if you weren't a science student. But we're not lying when we say that they don't care which undergraduate degree you have. It's simply about the courses. They don't care how they're completed, when they're completed, where they're completed, just that they are completed at some point. Um, and then I think I'm just gonna end off. Oh gosh, I'm trying to see here. Okay. I think some of these are getting a little bit in depth. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to post in the chat because Danielle for some reason doesn't have access. Any of you that didn't get your question answered, please send us an email. Danielle and I will check the inbox tomorrow and on Monday to see whichever of you have reached out to us. I've put it in the chat. It's transfer@ualberta.ca. Please let us know if you have any additional questions. We really appreciate you joining us today, and we hope that this has been informative and that you feel more confident applying into the University of Alberta, hopefully for this year or maybe for a future year. So with that, we are going to end the session and hope that you all have a wonderful night.